you are not going to believe what happened at the end of Smackdown, because a man who was not even supposed to be part of the storyline got launched face first into the floor, and by the time you finish this video you are going to know exactly who he is, why he was standing that close to the ring, and what this brawl means for the next chapter of one of the nastiest rivalries in WWE right now. Welcome back to Wrestling Juice, the channel that gets you the story behind the story, the details nobody else is digging up, and the breakdown you actually want before you scroll past another thumbnail. If you are new here, stick around, because today's video has everything: chaos in Boston, a mystery man in the crowd who turned out to be a real competitor with a real career, a general manager getting cornered backstage, a title picture getting rewritten in real time, and a main event that never even happened because two grown men could not wait one more second to tear each other apart. So sit back, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Friday night, TD Garden, Boston, Massachusetts, and SmackDown is closing out with what was supposed to be a clean, structured, high-stakes main event between Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn. Instead, what the world got was an out-of-control brawl that spilled out of the ring, through the crowd, past security, and ended with the show going off the air in absolute disarray. At the center of it, as always lately, is Randy Orton, and the man he cannot seem to stop hunting, Cody Rhodes. But buried inside that chaos was a moment that a lot of casual viewers might have scrolled right past, and that is exactly the moment we are unpacking today, because it turns out the story is bigger than just another Orton temper tantrum. Let's rewind and set the table properly, because context matters here, and if you only caught the highlight clips you are missing half of what actually went down that night. Earlier in the SmackDown broadcast, before any of the ringside chaos kicked off, Cody Rhodes stormed backstage looking for General Manager Nick Aldis. This was not a calm, measured conversation. Rhodes wanted answers, and more than that, he wanted a fight. He demanded another match with Randy Orton, plain and simple, no games, no build-up, just put them in the ring together again. Aldis, doing what any GM in his position would do, tried to manage the situation rather than just hand Rhodes exactly what he wanted on demand. He floated an idea instead, a suggestion that the two of them could settle their business at Sunday night's main event, which is scheduled for June 9th. Rhodes was not exactly in a patient mood, and he made it very clear in that backstage exchange that location and timing did not matter to him one bit. He would fight Randy Orton anywhere, any night, any city, whenever the Viper wanted to show his face. That line alone tells you everything about where Cody Rhodes' head was at walking into the main event slot that night. He was not thinking about Sami Zayn. He was not thinking about a fair, clean, sportsmanlike title eliminator. He was thinking about Randy Orton, and that focus, or maybe that distraction, is going to matter a lot once we get to how the night actually ended. Now here is the thing, because on paper, the actual scheduled main event of the show had absolutely massive stakes attached to it, stakes that had nothing to do with Orton at all, at least not directly. Cody Rhodes was set to face Sami Zayn, and this was not some throwaway program filler match. The winner of that contest was going to earn an opportunity at the undisputed WWE Championship, going up against whoever comes out on top between CM Punk and Kevin Owens. Think about that for a second. That is a massive prize sitting right there on the table. A win over Sami Zayn puts Cody Rhodes directly into a championship program against two of the most dangerous, most decorated competitors in the entire industry right now. This was a match that should have been must-see, appointment viewing, the kind of bout wrestling fans circle on their calendar and talk about for days afterward regardless of what else happens on the card. And yet, the match never happened. Not a single bell rang. Sami Zayn barely got through his entrance before the entire segment turned into something completely different. As Zayn was making his way to the ring, expecting to lock up with Rhodes in a genuine athletic contest with championship implications hanging over every move, Randy Orton had other plans entirely. Orton attacked Cody Rhodes before the match could even properly begin, and from that moment forward, any pretense of a normal wrestling match completely evaporated. This was not a wrestling match anymore. This was two men who clearly despise each other finally getting the excuse they needed to go to war in front of a sold-out Boston crowd, and once it started, there was no controlling it. The brawl did not stay contained to the ring, and honestly, if you have watched any Orton vs. Rhodes content over the last while, you already know that containment was never really on the table once these two get their hands on each other. It spilled out to ringside almost immediately. Then it kept going, pushing further and further away from the ring apron, past the barricades, and directly into the crowd itself. Fans who paid to watch a wrestling show suddenly found themselves inches away from a real, physical, out-of-control fight between two of the biggest stars on the entire roster. Officials tried to get in the middle of it, tried to create separation, tried to do their jobs and restore some kind of order to a situation that was rapidly spinning further and further out of control, and it simply was not working. Every time it looked like security or referees had a handle on things, Orton or Rhodes would break free and go right back at each other. And this is where the weapon started coming into play, because a fist fight alone was apparently not enough to satisfy either man's anger that night. Steel steps got involved. A trash can got involved. A steel chair got involved. This was not a wrestling match with weapon spots choreographed for dramatic effect, at least it did not look that way in the moment. It looked like two men reaching for anything within arm's reach because their hands alone were not doing enough damage fast enough. Cody Rhodes, at one point in the middle of all this mayhem, managed to land a low blow on Randy Orton, buying himself just enough separation and just enough of an opening to follow it up by blasting Orton with a steel chair. Think about the physical toll that takes on a human body. Chair shots are not soft, they are not gentle, and Orton took one square in the middle of all this pandemonium. Even with that much punishment dished out, and even with officials swarming the area trying to physically separate the two men, neither Orton nor Rhodes was willing to back down. That is a detail worth sitting with for a second, because in a lot of angles like this, once officials get bodies between two competitors, the fight naturally starts to cool off, at least enough for the show to move toward some kind of resolution before going off the air. That is not what happened here. SmackDown literally went off the air with the chaos still raging, unresolved, unfinished, with Orton and Rhodes still trying to get at each other even as the broadcast cut away. That is an incredibly aggressive way to end a show, and it tells you WWE wanted people talking, wanted people fired up, wanted people showing up to whatever comes next, desperate to see these two finally settle their business in an actual sanctioned match. Now let's get to the moment that a lot of people are talking about today, the moment that honestly might end up being the most talked about single image from that entire chaotic closing segment. Somewhere in the middle of all that brawling, all that spilling into the crowd, all that reckless disregard for anything or anyone standing nearby, Randy Orton shoved a member of the ring crew. And this was not a light push, not a stumble, not a glancing bump that happens naturally when two large men are fighting in a crowded, chaotic space. Orton shoved this man hard enough to send him crashing face first into the floor. If you saw the clip, you know exactly the kind of impact we are talking about here, the kind that makes your stomach drop a little bit watching it happen live, because in the moment, you genuinely do not know if this is scripted, planned, or a real, unfortunate accident born out of genuine chaos. Here is where the story gets a lot more interesting than just another instance of collateral damage during a wrestling brawl, because that crew member was not just some random backstage employee who happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time doing generic production work. That man has a name, and that name is Reese Maddox, and it turns out he is an actual professional indie wrestler who happened to be working cable setup near ringside that particular night. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not some anonymous stagehand who got unlucky. This is a man who steps into the ring himself, who takes bumps for a living, who has trained for this business, and on this particular Friday night in Boston, he was doing a completely different job, handling cables and technical setup near the ring, when Randy Orton's temper turned him into an unwilling part of the storyline. How do we even know this detail? How did fans put together who this man actually was? Credit goes to WWE referee Jason Ayers, who identified Maddox by posting a photograph of him just a short time before the Orton segment kicked off. That timing is honestly kind of eerie when you think about it. Jason Ayers put up a picture of Reese Maddox working around the ring area, and then, not long after, this same man ends up getting shoved to the ground in the middle of one of the wildest closing segments SmackDown has produced in recent memory. Without that photo and that identification from Jason Ayers, there is a real chance this entire story slips under the radar, filed away as just another anonymous crew member caught in the crossfire of a wrestling brawl. Instead, thanks to that connection, fans and analysts alike were able to dig deeper and find out exactly who this man is and what his background actually looks like. So who exactly is Rhys Maddox? Let's talk about his career for a bit, because it is more substantial than you might expect from someone working cable setup at a WWE television taping. Maddox began his professional wrestling career back in 2024, which means he is still relatively early in his in-ring journey, but he has already built up a resume that shows real dedication to the craft. He works as a freelancer, which in the wrestling business means he is not locked into an exclusive contract with any single promotion, giving him the flexibility to work dates across multiple companies and build relationships throughout the industry. He also goes by the name Rhys in some of his bookings, which lines up with that connection to Jason Ayers, the WWE referee who identified him in the first place. When it comes to his training, Maddox learned the business under some genuinely respected names. He was trained by Jason Ayers, which explains the personal connection and why Ayers was the one to identify him publicly, and he also trained under Bobby Fish, a name that carries a lot of weight in wrestling circles given Fish's own extensive career competing at the highest levels of the industry, including time spent in NXT and various major promotions. Having a trainer with that kind of pedigree tells you Maddox was not just picking up the basics in some backyard setup, he was learning from people who genuinely understand what it takes to succeed in this business at a serious level. As for where he comes from, Rhys Maddox hails from Bloomington, Indiana. That is his home base, the place he represents whenever he steps out for an introduction on an indie card somewhere around the country. And speaking of indie cards, Maddox has kept himself busy working dates for a handful of respected independent promotions. He has appeared for Dreamwave, a promotion that has built a strong reputation within the independent wrestling scene for showcasing talented up-and-coming performers. He has also worked for Coastal Championship Wrestling, another promotion that gives young talent room to develop and show what they can do in front of a live crowd. On top of that, he has competed for Reality of Wrestling, adding yet another credit to his growing list of promotions where he has had the chance to step into the ring and prove himself. But it does not stop at those independent bookings, because Maddox also appeared in a dark match tied to AEW Dynamite. For those who might not be as familiar with the terminology, a dark match is a match that takes place before or after a televised broadcast, not aired for the viewing audience at home, but performed live in front of a crowd that is already in the building. These matches are often used to test out talent, give newer performers valuable ring time in front of a big crowd, or simply fill out the in-arena experience for fans who showed up early or stuck around late. The fact that Maddox got the opportunity to work a dark match connected to AEW Dynamite, one of the biggest wrestling shows in the entire industry outside of WWE itself, tells you that people within the business have taken notice of him and have been willing to give him chances on some fairly big stages, even if those particular appearances did not make it to television. So when you put all of that together, you start to realize just how strange and honestly kind of wild this whole situation is. Here is a young, freelance indie wrestler, someone with real training under respected names, someone who has worked for multiple known independent promotions and even gotten a look from AEW in a dark match setting, and on this particular night in Boston, he was not there to wrestle. He was there doing cable setup work near the ring, a completely different job entirely, probably picking up some extra work around a WWE television taping the way a lot of wrestlers do between bookings to make ends meet and stay connected to the business. And then, out of nowhere, in the middle of a genuine, chaotic, out-of-control brawl between two of WWE's biggest stars, he becomes an unwilling part of the story, shoved hard enough to go face first into the floor by Randy Orton himself. Now, let's talk about what this actually means, because there are a few different angles worth thinking through here. First, from a pure production and safety standpoint, this is exactly the kind of moment that makes people ask questions about crowd control and ringside safety during these unscripted seeming brawls. When two performers are fighting through the crowd, through the ringside area, grabbing weapons, throwing each other into barricades and steel steps, there is inherent risk not just to the performers themselves but to anyone standing nearby, including crew members who are simply trying to do their jobs. Now, to be fair, we do not know with total certainty whether that specific shove was fully planned out as part of the segment or whether it was more of an in-the-moment, chaotic result of genuine physical momentum during a fast-moving brawl. Wrestling brawls that spill into crowd areas often involve a mix of planned spots and real, reactive physicality, and it is not always possible from the outside to say definitively which category a specific moment falls into. What we do know is that the man on the receiving end of that shove happens to be someone with real wrestling experience himself, someone who understands bumps and impact, which at the very least suggests he was better equipped than a random bystander to absorb that kind of contact, even if it certainly still looked rough watching it happen. Second, let's talk about what this brawl means for the actual in-ring product going forward, because that is ultimately what most of you are here for. WWE has confirmed, and this is not speculation, this is a confirmed booking, that Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes will face each other at Sunday night's main event. This is being billed as a rematch from WrestleMania 42, which immediately raises the stakes for anyone who remembers how that WrestleMania encounter between these two went down. When two stars of this caliber get a rematch on the level of a WrestleMania encounter, WWE typically treats it as a genuinely important program, not just a random television match thrown together to fill time. Given everything we just watched happen in Boston, given the sheer aggression, the weapons, the refusal to stop fighting even with officials swarming the area, given the fact that the go-home show before this match ended with the two of them still literally brawling as the broadcast cut to black, expectations for Sunday night's main event are going to be sky high. Let's dig a little deeper into why this rivalry has escalated to this level, because Orton and Rhodes have a long, complicated history in this business that goes back years, and if you have been following along, you know their connection is not some brand new storyline invented out of thin air. These are two men who have crossed paths repeatedly throughout their careers, sometimes as allies, sometimes as bitter enemies, and every time their paths cross again, it seems to come with a new layer of intensity added on top of whatever came before. Randy Orton, for those who might need a quick refresher, is one of the most decorated and controversial figures in modern WWE history. Nicknamed the Viper for his calculated, unpredictable, and often ruthless approach both in the ring and in his storylines, Orton has built a career on being the guy you genuinely cannot trust, the guy who will strike the moment you let your guard down, the guy who treats every rivalry as personal even when logic might suggest otherwise. Cody Rhodes, on the other hand, has spent recent years building one of the most compelling redemption and legacy-driven stories in the entire industry, chasing goals connected to his family's wrestling legacy, embracing the American Nightmare persona, and establishing himself as one of the most consistently featured and beloved top stars on the roster. When these two get locked into a program together, it carries weight because both men bring completely different energy into the story, Orton with his cold, calculating aggression, and Rhodes with his emotional, fired-up intensity, and Boston gave us about as clear an example of that contrast as you could ask for. Now, thinking ahead to Sunday night's main event, there are a lot of questions worth asking. Does this brawl carry consequences heading into the actual match? Will there be some kind of stipulation added given how far things got out of hand on SmackDown? Will Nick Aldis, the general manager who tried to manage this situation from the very start of the night by offering up Sunday night's main event as a landing spot for their issues, step in and add rules, restrictions, or even a special stipulation to try and control what happens between these two men when they finally do get locked in that ring together under official match conditions? Given the chair shots, given the weapons, given the fact that officials could not separate them even when they tried, it would not be surprising at all if WWE decided a completely clean, standard wrestling match is not really the direction this needs to go. There is a real chance we see some kind of hardcore stipulation, a no disqualification element, or some other twist added to account for just how unhinged this rivalry has become in such a short amount of time. And then there is the Sami Zayn situation, which honestly cannot be ignored here, because remember, Zayn was the man standing in the ring, ready to compete, when all of this chaos broke out and derailed his opportunity completely. He was set to face Cody Rhodes with a massive prize on the line, a shot at the undisputed WWE Championship against the winner of CM Punk vs Kevin Owens.